right, we are recording.
All right.
So welcome everybody to the final session in our Digital Accessibility Essentials training series. Today's session is ScarletCanvas. So we welcome you. We're glad you're here. I'm Amy Komacher, Instructional Development Specialist for the Learning and Organizational Development Unit.
And I'm Summer McLean, in the Learning and Organizational Development Unit, and I am an Instructional Aid Associate.
And just quickly, we're going to launch a couple poll questions. So here's the first one. Have you had the chance to attend at least one of the previous Digital Accessibility Essentials trainings? So looks like most folks have. We've got 11 responses out of 16. If you're just joining us, there's a poll question. If you could answer it for us quickly. Looks like we've got 12 responses. Okay, so the vast majority of you have been to at least one of our sessions. I'll end this poll and I'll start the next poll. And this poll is asking more directly about your current experience with ScarletCanvas. So if everyone could take a moment to answer that. So it looks like we've got a pretty good mix of folks who want to develop their first course in ScarletCanvas or teach one course. We've got another person who has several courses, and it appears from our 10 of 14 responses, most folks are aware of what ScarletCanvas is. So that's a good start. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ScarletCanvas, it is a learning management system that allows us to host courses for public audiences. So individuals can sign up for a course with any valid email address, and ScarletCanvas allows us to host courses in a formal learning management system similar to Carmen Canvas for the academic side, but it does allow the public to join us in that space. So ScarletCanvas allows us to host content and do quizzing and grades and things like that. So it does give us a really nice ability to provide high quality courses to the public. I'm going to end this poll and we'll kind of get going with the bulk of today's content. Since most of you have been at one session, we'll keep the intro stuff kind of brief, and we'll get into the ScarletCanvas details. So again, what is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility is the usability of content for individuals with disabilities and that impact the way they perceive digital content or use it, such as documents, websites, and videos. And designing digital content to be accessible is meant to provide information to be usable to the widest audience possible. And essentially, that's our goal with all of the content we produce. And so the next bit is why, right? So first of all, creating accessible digital content benefits all users. It improves the user experience. One of my favorite examples of improving a user experience in a more physical space, think about ramps on building entrances. So ramps were initially designed for wheelchair users, but ramps may also be useful for other folks that either have their hands full or don't want to use the stairs. Like at our vet office, I have a very large dog. You may have seen him like floating around the background in other meetings. He weighs 120 pounds. Our vet's office has a ramp, and he's an old dog that I cannot lift, and he actually prefers the ramp. So that helps us get into a building as well. So there are a lot of different reasons that a ramp might be useful to folks. And another thing that I want everybody to think about, particularly with today's topic on Canvas, is that the way that ramp is incorporated into the building says a lot, whether it's blatantly stated or not. You know, you can always tell when an older building was retrofitted because the ramp is like behind the back by the dumpsters in the loading dock, and it's not a great user experience for folks. And so with Canvas, I like to think about this because when we're building a course from the bottom up and from scratch, we have the opportunity to essentially, you know, build that accessible space and build the ramp, you might say, up front and where we really want it. So a building who was built that was built with more accessibility in mind might have a gently sloped entrance and no stairs at all, and it's a lot more inviting for users or for visitors to come to that building and get to experience the entrance. And so we kind of want to provide that grand experience for all of our Canvas users as well by providing that accessible space up front. And so the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, when we're building accessible digital content, it allows people with different abilities and different learning preferences to consume content in multiple ways. And that's really great, even in a learning theory context and a course design context, along with digital accessibility. And finally, you know, digital accessibility is required by law and by Ohio State's digital accessibility policy, which will provide more resources if you want to explore the policy in detail later. So that's the gist of it. I'm going to let Summer take over with Canvas and screen share, and we're going to get into the platform itself. And Summer's going to show you how to do all the cool things in Canvas.
Yes, just a second. Let me pull up so I can do a new share. All right. So you should be able to see my Chrome browser. And I'm in a Canvas course, and it sounds like almost everybody has a little bit of familiarity with Canvas. Amy gave a brief overview of what ScarletCanvas does for us in extension. And I want to go through, I will be sharing probably most of this session in Canvas itself. So this is a Canvas course that I created. It's essentially a ScarletCanvas course quality toolkit. So you may or may not already be in this toolkit. It's essentially how to build a course, and I can add whoever might be interested afterwards. And this course goes into a lot more than just accessibility. It also goes into design and activities and all that kind of stuff. And it's currently under construction. I'm trying to add new stuff all the time. But this is what a homepage might look like in ScarletCanvas if you have not interacted in ScarletCanvas or Carmen Canvas at all before. And right off the bat, I first want to talk about designing, like Amy said, for accessibility from the beginning. So when we're designing for accessibility from the beginning and for all users, clarity is key, essentially. So we want to be as clear as we can when we're designing courses, using consistent structure, consistent language, and have the navigation to be as intuitive as possible. So one of the things that's really important when you go to design a course are these navigation buttons on the left-hand side of the screen. You'll notice that I have a little I crossed out. Those buttons, and this is also the teacher view. So this is the view that you'll see when you go in to design your course. These buttons that have that little I crossed out are actually not viewable by the students or the learners in the course. So if I flip to student view, up in the top right-hand corner, you'll notice that there's far fewer options for people to get lost there. So it's really important, now I need to leave student view, that when you're designing a course, you eliminate as many buttons that are unneeded as possible. And I'll show you how to do this with these navigation buttons. So what you're going to do is go into settings. I need to choose an image here, apparently. you have these tabs at the top, course details, sections, and navigation is where I want to go. And this shows me all of the currently viewable navigation buttons by students. So right now I have home, modules, announcements, and discussions. And this, what you'll want to have visible will differ based on if it's a self-paced course or an instructor-led course. But some of the things that typically we always want to hide are the chat. Chats can't be deleted, unlike the discussions, especially if we're working with youth. We can't delete chat. So if there's something said in there that might be inappropriate, we wouldn't be able to get rid of that. SCORM, collaborations, big blue buttons. Sometimes you may want to show quizzes and sometimes you might not. Outcomes, sometimes you might want to have a syllabus. Files, there's not really a great way to show files or pages themselves in a meaningful way that makes sense to users. So instead we like to use the module to kind of structure our content, and I'll show you what modules look like in a second. So in order to hide these buttons, you just drag and drop them like this, or you can click on the ... and disable. And you can also change the order. So I like my order to have the home button at the top and the modules. So that makes the most sense, I feel, to users to have the home button, modules, and then occasionally they might need announcements and discussions for this course. For some reason, my scrolling wasn't working there. And then you'll want to make sure to save at the bottom of the screen. Amy, are you checking out the chat?
Yep, I
Okay.
am going to investigate. Elaine, I think the way the Canvas pages are read will depend on the header structure. I will investigate.
So this is the first point I like to make off the bat as far as navigation. So I'm going to go back to my home. We want to try to eliminate the amount of places where users can get lost. So anything that they don't need, hide it. And that'll be really helpful. I'm going to navigate to my modules. For those of you who don't currently have or use a Scarlet Canvas course or haven't used Canvas in general, this is your module overview. I have different modules for different aspects of course quality. So I have accessibility tools, course activity tools. So this is not set up like a traditional course with your module 1 or week 1, week 2. And this is where I add my course pages. And most of what we're going to be doing today is working in pages. So where users are actually looking at content that you've added to a page. Let me make sure. So when you're naming your modules and naming your pages, you want to use as descriptive names as possible, and also not use duplicate names. So if I were to duplicate this first module, which you can do, and I like to do when I'm building because it kind of replicates the design, and I just go in and change the actual content. If I duplicate this module, it says copy afterwards. So you'll want to change that name. And if I were to create another module with the same name, it'll say that I'm creating a new module with the same name, but when I go to find that at the bottom, which is where it populates, well, usually it'll put a 2 afterwards, because it tells you that that's a duplicate module, and it might do that with the pages. So you want to have unique and descriptive names for your modules and for your pages. So your modules are just a way to organize your content, and you want to organize your content as intuitively as possible. So the first content you want your users to see, I don't know why it's doing that. You're going to want to put at the top. Let me refresh. So your first content, your first module will be at the top, and then each new module will populate below that. So now I'm going to go into, and Amy, if you think of anything else that's important that I'm missing, definitely just jump in. But
Yep.
now I'm gonna go into an actual page, which is kind of like the page in a book where your actual content is. So your modules are like your chapters, and then the pages are your pages within the chapter essentially. So I've created a test page in this module. And how you create a page is at the plus button in the top right-hand corner. And then you use this drop down to add a page. Click create a new page, name your page, and then add that item. So I'll just create. And then your page adds, and you'll have to make sure to publish that. I'm going to use this page that I've already created to demonstrate some of the accessibility features that are in ScarletCanvas's rich content editor. So when you go in to edit a page, edit, what you have is the rich content editor, and this is where you'll add all of your content. And most of what we're going to do today is going to be spent in the rich content editor, because these are the things that you can control. And this is where all of your content is, and this is where accessibility is really paramount. So like in work, when we're working in Microsoft Word, heading structure is the first thing that you want to pay attention to. The page title automatically is your heading 1 structure. So when you're starting with creating a new heading at the top of your page, that's automatically going to be, you're going to choose heading 2. So I already have these headings and paragraphs formatted, but you use this drop down menu where you can choose heading 2 through 4 and then paragraph. I don't use the pre-formatted. So whenever you're adding something to Canvas, you're going to want to make sure if it's a paragraph, it's formatted as a paragraph. If it's going to be a second level heading, we have that formatted as such. And the same with your heading 3 and 4. And this is very also similar to Microsoft Word and PowerPoint are the list functions. So use proper list formatting when we're formatting lists in Canvas. And it's a little bit harder to, or a little bit easier to forget to do this than it is in Word, because it doesn't automatically correct you like Microsoft Word does. So when I'm creating a list, maybe a list that doesn't have an order, like I'm going to list out some fruits, you'll use this list tool. You can either click the ... button or click the drop down and choose the formatting for your list. So these top 3 are unordered lists. So something that doesn't have an order, I'm just listing fruits. And then the bottom 3 options are numbers, letters, and Roman numerals. And those are if your list has an order, such as this next list, I listed out the steps for hand washing. And so you'll want to make sure if there is an order to your list, you're using numbers, letters, or Roman numerals, because that helps the screen reader essentially know what kind of list they're about to get into and if the order of that list matters. So when you highlight over a list, something that looks like a list, this little, I know it's probably hard to see on a screen share, but there's a little red dot or a little red triangle that's indicating that, yes, this is formatted as a list.
Hey, Summer.
Yeah.
You know, back to the week we had with Word, that same convention holds in Word for
Yes.
accessibility, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Thank
very,
you.
very similar. If you attended the Word session, it's very similar. Just the how to do it is a little bit different. And sometimes when you're doing a list in Word, it automatically recognizes that you're creating a list and corrects it. In Canvas, it doesn't do that. So the only way to correct it is to use the accessibility checker in Canvas, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. And under these 2 properly formatted lists, I have an improperly formatted list where I just use the dash symbol. And you'll notice when I highlight those, I don't get a little red arrow over top of the list formatting button. All right, so So what we've covered so far are the heading and formatting, paragraph formatting drop down, and also the list formatting option. When we are building in Canvas, we also want to use a minimum of 12-point font. I think it's 11 for Microsoft Word. The font options, the font size options in Canvas are more limited than in Word if you're using the rich content editor, but always keep a minimum of at least 12-point font. Don't go to 10 or 8. That's just, I don't know why. I'm not sure why anyone might want that. I don't know. Yeah, that's super small. Making sure I'm not missing anything. So that's your formatting and page structure. Next, I want to go to descriptive hyperlinks. And we use these, or at least I use these a lot when I'm building Canvas courses. I don't want to make sure that users can get to documents or websites to which I'm referring them. So I showed this example in the Microsoft Word demonstration. It's important to use descriptive hyperlinks when you're linking to something. So a poor example of linking to the Digital Accessibility Center at Ohio State within the sentences, follow this link to read more about digital accessibility. For one thing, for a visual user, that really doesn't give me any idea about where I'm going. Yes, it might have something to do with digital accessibility, but I don't know what kind of website I'm going to be visiting. And for another thing, when a screen reader is reading through this, it says, follow this link, because it announces that it's about to read out a link. And if the link name is link, it just says link, which clearly is very annoying. So a better example, and I'm sure that somebody else could come up with an even better example, would be read more about digital accessibility at Ohio State's link Digital Accessibility Center. So not only does that give you an idea, the visual user, an idea of where this link is headed, but it also reads out link and is not as repetitive for the screen reader. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how to actually create descriptive links in the rich content editor. I might just go down and do that right now. And you can link to not only external websites, but also to files and other places within your course. So say I want to upload a file into Canvas, and I want to link to that file. To do that, I've already got the name that I want to call this. These are my accessibility slides. I've created a descriptive text that says where I want to go. And in order to link my text to the files, I'm going to highlight that text. Click on, I believe it is insert. There are a couple ways to do things. I tend to like to go to insert because it gives me all of my options. And I can insert a link, either an external link. So that is a website outside of Canvas. I can link to a page within the course, another page within the course, or I can go down to documents and upload a document. And I'm going to find my slides for today, select those and click open and submit. Needs a second to work. And then I have linked to my slides. So if I save this and click on this, it shows a download arrow that if I'm clicking on this, I'm going to download something or at least do an overview. And I have a link to my slides, and my laptop is dying. And my charger is in the other room, so I am so sorry about that.
It's okay. Summer, go grab it. I've got a question in the chat I can address or attempt to address while you are doing that. So
sorry.
No worries. Anne, Anne Baird, can you clarify just for a moment on your question in the chat? I'd love to answer this properly. Are there standard headers in the templates for self-directed and instructor-led courses? Can you clarify if you mean like the module structure or the pages?
Yeah, both. I just wonder, instead of having to pick what type of heading for the content in a page, is there suggested headers already?
Right. So yeah, the new templates that Summer developed, we have an instructor-led template and we have a self-paced course template. They have sample language and sample page design with the headers included on both the modules and the pages. So that does give you a good start if you are going to build a course. We recommend using the template. And the main thing is if you find that the language that we've provided in the template doesn't fit, the main thing is that you keep the header assignments in a similar order. You'll see in Summer's sample page that heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4 are all stacked in order. That's very important for a screen reader to be able to accurately describe the page structure to someone who can't see it. And then in addition, we talked about consistent language. So if you do decide to edit the language in a template, really carefully consider it, design your first module, and then replicate that look and feel across all the modules. Okay, Summer, you can continue. I think we've adequately addressed.
Am I unmuted?
Yes. Okay,
because I can't find the toolbar. It's not showing up on my computer, so I'm glad I'm already unmuted. So where was I? We were talking about descriptive links. So the easiest way that I found to link to an external site, to link to a page within your course, or to link to a file in your course is to create the name of what you want to link to, highlight that, and then insert. Otherwise, if I were to just insert the same file, so I go to insert document, upload document. If I insert the file without having highlighted text that I want that name to be, it gives me the maybe a not so intuitive or clearly described, like it does the file name, it shows the file name. And if I want to edit that, I have to right click on link options, and then edit the text. And I just find it easier to do it the other way around. But you typically, if your file name is not clear, you typically do want to edit that text to describe what that is linking to. And the same thing goes for a website link. Instead of having a long URL that maybe doesn't explain where you're going, highlighting text that you've already defined, highlight that. And what you can actually do is, if you say, I want to link to, I've pulled up WebAIM contrast checker. I'm going to copy that URL, go back to my Canvas page and paste it. That might not mean a lot to some people, but if I type in WebAIM contrast checker, highlight that, and then paste over top of it, it'll put that URL in that descriptive text. And I think that also looks better and makes more sense to a screen reader versus reading out this entire URL. And I just found out that recently, that you can highlight and then just paste over top of it. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I went a little bit out of order, but I think the use of descriptive links is one huge way that you can not only make your Canvas page look a little nicer, but also make it more usable. So moving on to uploading images, and you may have noticed that a lot of the things that we talked about in either Word or PowerPoint kind of translate over into using ScarletCanvas. And also, whenever you're building a file in PowerPoint or Word, it's definitely going to lend itself better to being used in ScarletCanvas, because that's one less piece of accessibility you have to worry about once you're building your course. So when you upload an image, again, I like to go to Insert. You can also go to the little image picture. You can upload an image or use one that you already have in the course. You can also do links this way, but I like to go to Insert because it has everything in under one tab. So I'm going to upload an image. It's going to be Accessibility Cat, I believe. Yes. And when you initially go to upload an image, you can add alternative text before you even import the image into Canvas. So Accessibility Cat, or try again. I'm going to describe this as fluffy cat wearing a vest and using a laptop. And so now a screen reader, once I hit submit, when it comes to that image, it'll read out fluffy cat wearing a vest and using a laptop. If this was just some type of decorative image that didn't convey any type of information, I could mark it as decorative, and then the screen reader will skip over that image and not read it out. But it's very important that if your image is conveying any kind of information, that you do provide alternative text. So I'm going to leave that. If you decide that you need to come back to add alternative text or change the text that you've already added, if you click on the photo that you've added and select image options, on the right-hand side of the screen, that's where you can edit your alternative text or make it a decorative image. I'm going to resize that. If you're adding maybe a complex image or diagram, that alternative text just won't do it justice. That's when we talk about adding an image transcript next to the image. And that can take the form of a text file or a Microsoft Word file that you describe the image, and then upload a file like I showed you with the PowerPoint slide example, upload a file for that image transcript, or even write a caption below the image that's describing the image. And sometimes that can be helpful for even sighted users to add a caption under a really complex image. And a lot of the same goes with tables. I mentioned when we were talking, or a couple of weeks ago when we were doing Word and PowerPoint, tables, especially complex tables, we like to avoid those because sometimes it can get tricky with screen reader. So never use a table as a way to visually format an item. For example, creating a 2-cell table, putting an image in the top and a caption in the bottom. That's not really very user-friendly for screen readers. So only using tables to actually present data or something that would originally or normally be presented in a table. When we're adding tables, first of all, I don't think that Canvas will do a split or merge cells, at least not very easily. So we want to avoid those. And if you have to add an image of a table, including a text transcript. But for our tables in Canvas, the two most important things are that we have a caption for our table and a header row. The easiest way to actually add those is by clicking this accessibility checker, and then it prompts you to add those things. So I'll just demonstrate this real quick. If I click on my accessibility checker, it's going to catch everything that's wrong, but I'm just going to flip down to my table. So this is an example of a bad table. I did not add a caption and I did not designate a header row. but the accessibility checker catches that and I can add my table caption here. I was creating a couple tables in the last few days, so it already has some suggestions. You'll have to type in your caption, hit apply, and then it'll ask you to set a table header or a column. So you'll always want to have at least a header row. So I would select that and then click apply, which is what I've done for the good example of a table below. I have my caption at the top. It's automatically designated a header row, and then I have my data. So my screen reader would read the caption, announce that there's a header row and read across the header row, and then read into my data. Amy, anything else I need to address? Okay, just checking the chat.
I think we're good in the chat.
Okay. And I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully some of it will sound familiar from working in PowerPoint and Microsoft Word. The next piece is color contrast. So unlike PowerPoint, but like Word, the rich content editor in Canvas pages will catch inappropriate color contrast. So I have an example of an okay color contrast, maybe not the best example, it passes. And then an inappropriate color contrast, it's a little bit too light against the white background, and my accessibility checker will catch that. So for text in Canvas pages, the accessibility checker will catch it, but if for images and graphics, you'll need to manually or visually inspect those to decide if those have appropriate color contrast. And we can also use the WebAIM color contrast checker that we showed, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And I'll include a link to that in the resources at the end of the presentation.
Elaine has a quick question going back
Sure.
to the tables. In the case of the table, should the caption go at the top?
This Canvas automatically puts a caption at the top. There is a way to edit the HTML to put it at the bottom, but I wouldn't worry about that. So I would automatically add where the caption goes, which is at the top, if that answers your question.
And from a usability perspective, our brains, and this also overlaps with data visualization, our brains aren't super good at tables. So giving people that primer with the caption at the top would probably be really good information for all users. So again, it's interesting that digital accessibility also overlaps with best practice for data visualization, learning theory, and all that again.
Yeah.
And Anne says, can you show how to add the caption again?
So to me, the easiest way to add a caption is to create your table. And then when you're finished, click on this accessibility checker and let Canvas catch it for you. As you go through the checker, it'll prompt you to add a caption on a table where you haven't added a caption. And then you'll click apply. And it does that with the header rows too. Tables are to me, a little finicky in Canvas. I think you can also add a caption by selecting the table and going up to table properties, show caption, then you have to save it and then type in the caption at the top. So there is a couple ways to do it. I like to wait until the accessibility checker catches it for me, so it just helps me get to it easier. And then also you can also add a header or designate a header if you click on your table and go up to table properties, I think advanced, no. See, I'm not even sure exactly. Row.
We have a couple more questions in the chat. So Angela asks, if you add a detailed description to an image for all users, should you eliminate the alt text so a screen reader won't read both?
I think that really depends.
I think from I think from a structural perspective, you would still want a really brief description of the image, because otherwise a screen reader isn't going to know what to tell a person relying on a screen reader. So even if the image alt text is accessibility cat, and then you have like the full description under that says accessibility cat's the cutest, fluffiest cat you've ever seen. You know, but the screen reader is still going to need to give something a little more useful to provide some context of where someone's at in the page, because otherwise it'll just read out an image file name. And so it is useful to help individuals perceive where they're at in the page structure if that is tagged.
Right. Theoretically, you could mark it as decorative, but again, they wouldn't have the concept of that, oh, I'm showing an image and this is the description of the image. And if you don't add, like Amy was saying, if you don't add alternative text when you go to, when you add an image in the first place, a lot of times it replaces the alternative text with the file name, which sometimes is like file HBQ1967, and that's also not very helpful. And if it's using the file, well, let me try adding an image, because sometimes Canvas will flag it if you add an image and you didn't add alternative text that says don't use file name as alternative text. So normally it'll flag it, but I like to manually check it as well because sometimes it doesn't. And then another question.
Elaine makes a great point. Alt text is helpful to add there in case you have a broken link and the image isn't available. It gives sighted users some context as well when things are broken and not loading images properly.
One example is sometimes in Safari, Canvas does not like to display pictures at all for some reason that we don't have any control over. So if you've added alternative text, it's helpful to everyone. And demonstrate getting into the contrast checker again. So do you mean the WebAIM, like the external tool, or within Canvas? Sarah. I'll show both. The WebAIM contrast checker is an external like URL. This is just an online tool, which I'll provide a link for, where for non-text items, in the case of Canvas, you can check and see if it passes WCAG standards. Within Canvas, Canvas will actually flag inappropriate color contrast within this accessibility checker feature, the little person in a circle. It's telling me right now I have 4 issues, and that's where it will catch the improperly formatted list, my table, and then it also tells me that I have an issue with text being too small and not having appropriate color contrast. And so it asked me to change that color. So if I make it darker and then select apply, it fixes it. But I'm not fixing these issues right now. Yeah, thank you, Amy, for the WCAG acronym. All right, let me double check. Any more questions right now? It's a smaller group, so I feel, and we've got some time. Okay, so that's a good point. So in the WebAIM color contrast checker, you need to be able to find, you input the colors yourself. So if I'm in Canvas, I'm gonna highlight that color or choose a color. Let's see. In Canvas, I can go into this little palette and copy the, what is this called? The hex number. Copy that, so whatever color it is, copy it, and then paste that into the WebAIM contrast checker. So my background color is white. I'm going to copy the hex number into here, and then it tells me whether it passes. We subscribe to the AA standard, so it technically passes, but might not be the very best choice for accessibility. But you won't need to do that with text. in Canvas pages. Just if you have created a diagram that you saved as a picture or a graphic, then you might want to do that. Hex number for Scarlet. Sarah, do you want to unmute? I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question.
Yeah, do you have the hex number for Scarlet that's
Oh.
acceptable?
Oh, like the brand colors. So
Yes.
we don't have all of the palettes like as far as what's accessible and what's not, like, but you can take any number from the brand palette and put it in there. And what we recommend doing is dedicating some time to do that. And I can get a link to the brand palette here. Is taking some time, like the traditional Scarlet, that's accessible on white. But you got to watch the grays and the Scarlet, and the grays and the whites. And you can also take some time to explore the full extended color palette. But what I like to do is take some time to pick the colors I'm trying to use and double check them all ahead of time and kind of save those. Whether you kind of put the color codes on a PowerPoint slide or something, and then you can reuse them later. So if you check them once and you kind of save that in a safe space for next time, you can always reuse it later. So there's the full color palette that you could go tinker with at the webbing guideline site.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for unmuting. All right. And then the last piece for Canvas accessibility, we talk about uploading video. So video was last week's session. We talked about creating captions and captioning your videos, and also providing text transcripts. So when we are providing video in ScarletCanvas, we want to eliminate the need to leave ScarletCanvas to view any kind of content when we can. So that goes for files and external URLs. And as much as possible, we want to eliminate the need for the user to actually leave Canvas. So the best way to do this with video is actually embedding the video versus linking to like a Zoom video. So YouTube, Amy, I saw you unmute. Did you want to mention something?
Yeah, public service announcement. Pretty please upload your videos as files in Canvas. They will not fit, they will not play back well, and it's just really not a good user experience. It's also not a good way to protect content because then users can download them. So you are going to need a video hosting service like MediaSite, which is university approved and free. So we can get you that information if you're not familiar with MediaSite, or if you have an approved YouTube channel. But basically, video files should not be living in your Canvas course.
Correct.
Please don't.
Yes, it's actually not as user-friendly as MediaSite or YouTube. And it takes a lot longer to actually upload, I think, and makes everything run a lot slower. So when you are showing a video in your course, I have MediaSite and YouTube both pulled up, and in those cases, rather than linking to your video by copying the URL and pasting it in, it's usually best to embed a video instead. So I will show you how to do that with YouTube very quickly. So let's select, let's go to my library. I'm not signed in. Okay. I'm just gonna type in cat video because I think that's safe.
Accessibility, cat needs a friend.
Funniest cats of 2022, and I'm gonna pause that. But I want to show this in my course for whatever reason. I'm glad Amy got a kick out of that. So when I found a video, if it's not my own video, this is not a video I created, but I found a really great video that I want to show in my course. I'm going to embed that video into my course so they do not have to navigate to YouTube and see all of this other suggestions for videos to watch. So to do that, I'm going to click share and then embed, and it provides you with an embed code, and you'll just copy that. Go back to your Canvas course, insert, embed, and then paste that. You can change the size of the video if you so choose with the width and height, but it's usually a decent size. And so I've embedded my video there. Also, what I like to do for screen readers is to check on the video time and then add that in. So it's always best practice to add in the length of your video so a screen reader knows how long they're going to be watching it, and just so that I don't have to click play to see how long this video is going to be. And along with that, for YouTube videos, they provide, usually if they have captions, by the way, do not embed a video that does not have captions into your course. Always make sure that a video you've chosen does have closed captions. YouTube also has a way to open a transcript. So you might say in your Canvas course, if it's not a video you own, like navigate to YouTube to view video transcript. And they can click on that video from here and it takes them to YouTube, and then they'll if they're used to using a YouTube transcript, then they'll know how to pull that up. But unfortunately, you cannot extract that transcript and post it. If you own a video on YouTube, this is where you would post the video transcript as a file that can be downloaded. And you can download, we showed on last week's session, we showed how to download transcripts from YouTube. And for MediaSite, I have MediaSite pulled up, and I'm gonna link a video that I own on equine. Well, I'll do on the tick life cycle. So if you are familiar with MediaSite, and again, last week's video gives a more broad overview. In order to embed a video that you host on MediaSite, you'll click on your video, go to share presentation on the right-hand side of the screen. Don't copy the quick link, go to embed. You can change the size of the player that you want to use. Copy that embed code, and it's the same process once you go back to ScarletCanvas. You go to insert, embed, and then paste your embed code and click submit. And you'll type your video length. It doesn't have to be exactly above or below, but somewhere next to the video that makes sense and is consistent across all the videos in your course. Video time length, and then also include the transcript if it's a video that you own. Include a downloadable transcript. And like I said, only embed videos that you don't own, only curate videos with closed captions. So Vimeo is not a great place to look because they don't automatically close caption. YouTube is a better option. Otherwise, go ahead, Amy.
Elaine brings up a good point too. If a YouTube video happens to have a provided transcript, whether it's in like the description or it's available, I don't know if you can download it through the player. I've never actually tried that. But if there is a transcript provided by whoever owns that YouTube video and it's in the description, that is acceptable. You do not have to make a separate transcript.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Use what you can, definitely.
Now, that said, we still want to make sure that the content we're curating has really accurate captions. Obviously, it's not a good user experience if you're curating some video and the captions aren't any good either. So the goal is 98% accuracy. Obviously, we're not all going to go count words in a video that we've borrowed, but watch a few minutes, make sure it looks right. You'll get a pretty quick read on whether somebody bothered to edit those captions or not.
Right. And two other things I want to point out before, since we only got a couple minutes left. Like I said, most of the content is about building Canvas pages, but a couple other notes that I want to make when it comes to quizzes, for those of you who have quizzes in your Canvas courses, is that there is the ability when you go into a quiz to moderate the quiz. And that means that you would moderate the quiz if you maybe have a student thinking maybe 4-Hers that need extra time on a time quiz. And when we're thinking about time quizzes in the first place, we need to think about, does it actually need to be timed, or is there a purpose for having a timing? Maybe if it's a remotely proctored quiz, we would need to have a timing. If not, really think critically about what does the time limit serve. But if you do need to have a time limit and you do need to moderate the quiz for one or multiple individuals, you can actually go in and also give extra attempts. And then also, this one doesn't have a time limit yet, but these are the people currently in this course. You can give extra attempts on the quiz and also extend the time limit for any individual that would need it. One other point in editing or creating quiz questions is that I have 2 questions here. 2 different types of questions that look very similar. The first is a multiple choice. It's asking which animal is the best, and the user can only select one option. Whereas the next question is a multiple answer. So it asks which animals do you like, and the user can select more than one. If you are using a multiple answer question, make sure you're saying select all answers that apply, especially if there is more than one correct answer. So I know that's very, very brief overview, but those are 2 really important points when we're talking about Canvas quizzes. So now I will answer any questions.
And one quick thing while you all mull over questions, we recommend building as much content as possible into Canvas pages because it improves the accessibility and it improves the usability of the course across multiple devices. And also, since we work with the public, we can't always guarantee that people have Microsoft licenses to view PowerPoint, to view Word documents. So if you have some content that was built in, let's say, lots of PowerPoint slides, I'd encourage you to think critically about which of those slides would be appropriate to add to Canvas pages instead. And it just provides a lot better mobile first experience as well. So as we see more users join us from phones and tablets, building this content into Canvas pages is really great for that user experience.
No, and when you duplicate a module and you edit one of the copies, it does not make a change to all of the copies.
So we have just a couple minutes left if anybody would like to stay to ask more questions. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your attendance at all these sessions. Feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions. And Summer, do you want to pop up the resources on the screen really quick
Sure.
for those that are still here? We've got some resources and we can drop those in chat as well for anybody who's still here. Perhaps since we're up against time. Oh, Summer's fast. Got it. All right. So the resources are in the chat if you'd like to save the chat for later. Again, thank you for coming, and we'll hang out here for another minute if you have questions.